ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's debate. My name is Shunim Josiah and I'm the chairman and Connor is the timekeeper. The adjudicator is Mr. Brunker. The topic for tonight's debate is that driverless cars are a really bad idea. The affirmative team seated to my right is from St. Peter's Girls' School. The negative team seated to my left is from Pembroke. The speaking time for this debate is 4 to 5 minutes. A single warning bell will sound 1 minute before the speaking time, and a double bell will sound at the speaking time. A continuous bell may be rung 30 seconds after the speaking time, in which case the speaker must sit down immediately. Please ensure that your mobile phones and other electronic devices are switched off. I declare this debate open and call upon the first affirmative speaker, Asher Shaw.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Asha and I am the first speaker for the affirmative team. The topic for tonight's debate is that driverless cars are a really bad idea, and we, being the affirmative team, strongly agree with this statement. We define a driverless car as being a robotic vehicle which can drive to destinations, sense the environment and navigate without human operation. We also define and will use throughout our speech really in place of wheelie. Tonight I will be discussing the ethical and economic side as well as the safety that is involved because of this. Our second speaker, Sarah, will discuss the practicality side of this debate, and our third speaker, Hannah, will rebut and summarise our team's case. Now to my first point. The main problem in which arises on the topic of driverless cars is the ethical reasoning and decision-making factor that we apply on the roads. A robot does not possess any ethical reasoning behind decisions made, nor can it be programmed to process situations where human ethics would be necessary. This means that they could potentially create a more serious dilemma in the matter of an accident and life or death. What does the car do when confronted between potentially killing the driver or a pedestrian? The driver is not at fault in this situation, having not been driving. So how is it fair if the car decides to kill the driver? And then what about the pedestrian, who deserves that right to live just as much, especially if they are not at fault? And so begins this questioning of how does the car apply moral principles to everyday situations that literally rely on such thinking, subsequently reflecting on the nuance of utilitarianism created. When it becomes possible to program decision-making based on moral principles into machines, will self-interest or the public good predominate? With that, another question arises. How are we supposed to feel, knowledgeable of the fact that governments can mandate driverless cars to choose between situations based on algorithmic morals? The fact that we will essentially be giving no say in choosing what we would do in situations on the road means that we will basically be giving our fate away to governments and manufacturers who decide based on what they program. A survey completed by theworldnews.com showed that 60% of those surveyed were not comfortable with driverless cars based on the fact that they would be programmed using algorithmic morals for decision making. Now to my second point. To begin with, it is undeniable that not everyone would be able to afford these cars. Currently, the engineering, power, computer requirements, software and sensors add up to more than $100,000. This makes their introduction unfair based on the fact that only the wealthier part of our population will be able to afford these cars. Because of this, our roads will hitherto be divided into driverless cars and human-operated cars, essentially creating a human versus robot dispute, particularly based on, as I discussed before, the fact that human ethics differ to that of computer-programmed reasoning. This can potentially create a lot more danger on our roads than if we were to have everyone with the same foundation of reasoning. These cars rely on signals and communication with each other to safely navigate on the roads. Having a mixture of cars that don't all communicate with each other will inevitably cause chaos, especially based on the fact that these cars essentially rely on this form of communication to work. And then, if we were to supposedly going to replace all cars with driverless cars in order to achieve this maximum safety possible, we will experience a mass job loss, particularly in the public transport area, including taxi drivers, bus drivers, and even the transportation of freight. Additionally, courses for drivers' education would most likely go out of business due to the fact that it would not be necessary to learn how to drive anymore. And finally, the manufacturing of these cars will be based overseas, leaving the profits and money made from them to go to foreign manufacturers. If it wasn't bad enough that we would experience a major economical drop, particularly in job loss, the money made from these cars wouldn't even go towards our benefit. So, in conclusion, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, it is clear that driverless cars are a really bad idea.
I call upon the first negative speaker, Jack Lee.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight's topic for this debate is that driverless cars are a really bad idea. We as the negative team strongly believe that this statement is false. We agree with the definition given by the affirmative team. However, before I start my debate, I would like to point out the flaws in the affirmative team case. The first speaker of the affirmative team has tried to tell you that many driverless cars will not be able to register the fact that there will be a pedestrian on the road and that it could hit. This is false because many people who will be able to register are more likely to hit the pedestrian than a car. As I will discuss, human error causes 90% of all road crashes, further proving that driverless cars are not a really bad idea. Tonight, as first speaker for the negative team, I would like to discuss two main points: the death toll associated with cars and the potential savings we will have if we invested in driverless cars. Now to my first point. There are too many deaths on our roads due to car crashes. According to acert.org, nearly 1.3 million people worldwide die in road crashes each year. That is on average 3,287 deaths per day. An additional 20 to 50 million people worldwide are injured or become disabled per year. According to acert.org, road crashes are the leading cause of death among young people aged 15 to 29, and the second leading cause of death among young people aged 5 to 14. These people had their whole lives ahead of them and are still each year nearly 400,000 people under 25 die on our roads, Wales roads, which is on average over 1,000 a day. According to BusinessInsider.com, human error contributes to 90% of all car crashes. Human error includes the use of depressants such as drugs and alcohol, mistakes, distractions such as mobile phones and children in cars, fatigue and speeding. Driverless cars will change this dramatically. As per the definition given by Google.com, a self-driving car is a car with features that allow it to accelerate, brake and steer a car's course with limited or no driver interaction. Extensive testing has been done, and according to Google.com, Google's self-driving cars have successfully driven 1.2 million kilometers accident-free. The average motorist drives 24,000 kilometers per year. Therefore, Google cars would have been accident-free for the equivalent of 50 years in one person's life. If 90% of all car crashes are caused by human error, and driverless cars eliminate human error, then 90% of all car crashes just wouldn't happen if we populated our roads with self-driving cars. Also, 90% of deaths and injuries caused by car accidents would also not occur in a world where self-driving cars were the norm. Driverless cars would make the roads of the world a lot safer place, as they would be capable of providing reliable, safe driving. Now to my second point, the potential savings to individuals and the government. For individuals, the more effective use of travel time with a driverless car would mean that you'll be able to eat breakfast if you are running late. Women could put makeup on, and business could be conducted on the way to work. This would give us all a more effective use of time in a time-poor society and increase the time spent with family and loved ones. A driverless car would keep our aging population independent for longer. Visually impaired or the frail elderly would still be able to travel in their own cars. This would improve their well-being and help them to live more fulfilling lives. From a government point of view, according to BusinessInsider.com, the total global economic savings if we put driverless cars on our roads is $109.7 billion. Fewer car crashes means fewer injuries and deaths, which would reduce the burden on an overcrowded health system. If doctors and nurses weren't rushed off their feet in the accident and emergency department, then more time and money could be spent on research into such funds as cancer, Alzheimer's, and other deadly diseases. Therefore, driverless cars would create a far more efficient society with economic savings than the one we live in today. In conclusion, we the negative team strongly believe that driverless cars are not a really bad idea, because we believe that many accidents and deaths will not occur and we'll be able to save time and money. Thank you.
I call upon the second affirmative speaker, Sarah Calvis.
Good evening. The topic for tonight's debate is that driverless cars are a really bad idea. Before I continue my team's case, I would like to point out some errors in the opposition's arguments. They stated that driverless cars would be safer because human error would not happen, whether that be because of drunk driving, distractions, or just simple road mistakes. However, Google admits that the people testing these driverless cars had to take over thousands of times because they felt unsafe or the car's technology failed. Necessary human intervention defies one of the main purposes of these cars, which is to allow people to be able to distract themselves without worrying about a car accident. They also stated that driverless cars would allow people more free time. However, as I stated before, Google admits that this human intervention is sometimes necessary, meaning that these people would still have to concentrate on the car and how it is driving. Now I can continue my team's case. Firstly, driverless cars are a really bad idea, as their technology can fail in certain conditions, making them impractical and possibly dangerous. The Guardian states that between September 2014 and November 2015, one of Google's driverless cars experienced 272 failures, and the human driver had to intervene 13 times because the car's technology breakdowns put them into unsafe situations. Chris Urmson, director of the Google car team, also says that the technology used to navigate driverless cars cannot differentiate between certain objects and rain droplets or snowflakes. This makes them unsafe to drive during heavy rainfall and can put the user in serious danger. Another technological problem these cars have is the need for a perfect map to function. Urmson explains to the Daily Mail that routes may lack small details such as a pothole or a new set of traffic lights, which could result in the human driver having to take over the wheel or possibly a collision with another vehicle. This means that the maps that these cars rely on would have to be updated constantly to avoid dangerous situations. This imperfect technology makes these driverless cars a really bad idea. Secondly, driverless cars are a bad idea because of their potential to threaten the user's privacy. According to The Atlantic, driverless cars will be able to collect data about their users and use it to promote sponsored companies more effectively than any commercial on television or social media. Earlier this year, Senator Ed Markey, Democrat from Massachusetts, was asked at a congressional hearing if the driverless cars would undertake a minimum standard for consumer privacy protection. No one who was there to testify, including representatives from General Motors and Lyft, a ride-sharing service, answered the question, with the head of Google's self-driving car project saying that he was not in a position to comment on the matter. In fact, Google's chief legal counsel blew off the question again, saying that it is too early in the game of driverless cars to consider the user's privacy. Privacy is a human right, and these cars threaten that right. They take away the security of knowing that personal data is actually kept personal by leaving it unprotected for anyone to use. If driverless cars threaten the user's privacy this much, then clearly they are a really bad idea. This leads me to my third point, which is a problem of hackers and what they may do if they can break through the seemingly non-existent security on these driverless cars. Finnish security expert Mikko Haaponen says that ransomware, which is hacking into software and then demanding a ransom to release it, is fully expected to become a reality with driverless cars, considering the technological incidents that are already occurring in our society. Haaponen also says lack of car rigor by car makers has made hacking a pressing issue. However, demanding a ransom doesn't appear the worst thing that can happen. Last year, an article appeared in the technology magazine of the American National Defense Industrial Association about a team of Virginian-based researchers who remotely broke into a driverless car and took control of the brakes, steering, and accelerator. Having control of these vital functions can make it easy to harm or kill the driver of the car. The MIT Technology Review also states that driverless cars are much easier to hack than ordinary cars because of the complicated technology and therefore weak points in the system. The article goes on to say that this problem may never have a solution because the driverless car manufacturers rely heavily on third-party suppliers, meaning that they will never be able to see all of the code in their self-driving cars. This large threat to the user's safety makes driverless cars a really bad idea. Thank you.
I call upon the second negative speaker, Eleanor Tiro.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that driverless cars are a really bad idea. We, the negative team, strongly believe this statement is false. Before I begin, I would like to point out some flaws in the opposition's case. The first affirmative speaker has said that the ethical decisions that a driverless car may have to make, such as who to save in a certain situation, would prove too difficult, making driverless cars a bad idea. However, I would like to point out that no matter what ethical decisions the cars are programmed to make, they will still save many lives. As our first speaker Jack has mentioned, driverless cars are much safer and could prevent 1.3 million road-related deaths worldwide. This shows that driverless cars are not a really bad idea. The first affirmative speaker also said the cost of driverless cars will be too much. However, this technology in the long run will not be so expensive. The lives saved by driverless cars will be worthwhile. Not only this, but the overall cost of driverless cars will go down, as all new technologies eventually do. This proves that driverless cars are not a really bad idea. The second affirmative speaker stated that driverless cars will need to be able to take that the driver would still need to be able to take over driverless cars. This may be true for the moment. However, I will soon be talking about how driverless car companies are working to create cars that require no human intervention. In fact, the second generation Google car will be completely driverless, with no brake pedal or steering wheel. This proves that driverless cars are not a really bad idea. Our first speaker has already mentioned how much safer driverless cars are and how much more time people will gain out of driverless cars. Today I will be talking about how technology is the future and how driverless cars will allow a greater population to commute through cars. Now to my first point. Technology is the future, and whether you like it or not, it is shaping the world. People have always been saying that the technology of the future is too dangerous or even impossible. For instance, Simon Newcomb, an applied mathematician, once said, "Flight by machines heavier than air is unpractical and insignificant, if not utterly impossible." And an engineering editor of the Times said, "All attempts at artificial aviation are not only dangerous to human life, but foredoomed to failure from the engineering standpoint." However, when you look at how the world has progressed, it is clear that aviation is not as dangerous or as impossible as many thought it would be. Are driverless cars not similar? Society is often brought up on the idea that change is not good, but when we look at some of the most life-changing inventions, there were always the fears of what technology could bring. People believed that Edison's invention of the electric light bulb was going to be a conspicuous failure. The British Post Office decided they had no need for telephones, as they had plenty of messenger boys. The French military decided that airplanes were toys with no military value. Much like these inventions, driverless cars could save millions of lives, shaping the world. When it comes to the future of cars, driverless car technology will be extremely important. And this is why we, the Negative Team, strongly believe that driverless cars are not a really bad idea. Now to my second point, that driverless cars will allow a greater population to commute through cars. Although at first people will need a proper license to drive driverless cars, according to the New York Times, technology will soon advance to allow many more people to attain a license. With disabled, elderly and other people in mind, autonomous car companies are working to make commuting an easier task. Instead of isolating people who are unable to attain licenses, driverless cars will provide independence with this very viable option. Dan Flores, a General Motors spokesperson, said, "One day there will be fully automated cars that drive themselves under all circumstances. This will lead to many more people being able to commute via driverless cars, therefore creating an easier and more efficient way to get many from point A to point B without hassle." Advocates are pushing manufacturers and regulators to ensure that people with disabilities are included in the planning and development of driverless cars. This is how elderly people, disabled people, and many others who could not attain licenses will be safely given the right to commute in a driverless car. With the support of these companies, transportation will be forever changed for many. In fact, the second generation Google car will be entirely driverless, meaning it will have no wheel or brake pedal. Chris Unson, the director of Google's self-driving car, has called it a vehicle that operates fully without human intervention. It is designed so physically unable people will be able to use it, which again will be a great stop towards allowing everyone to have the right to commute in a car, thus proving that driverless cars are not a really bad idea. So, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, we the Negative Team strongly believe that driverless cars are not a really bad idea, because not only is technology like driverless cars a healthy future, but driverless cars will allow a greater population to commute through cars. Thank you.
I call upon the third affirmative speaker, Hannah Brown.
Good evening, everyone. The topic for tonight's debate is that driverless cars are a really bad idea. We, the affirmative team, strongly agree with this statement. Before I continue to summarise my team's arguments, I would first like to point out some flaws in the other team's case. The negative team stated that driverless cars will reduce crashes and human error. Yes, there is human error, but there is also computer errors. How often does your computer freeze or have a technological failure? Computers are not the miraculous answer. As it happens, one of these computer errors has already occurred when an American man's driverless car failed to avoid a truck crossing in front of it and crashed straight into it. There are only very few driverless cars on the road at the moment, and already we're having issues like this. Imagine the problems when there are millions of cars on the road. The negative team also said that driverless cars will allow us to continue on with the things we're doing at that moment in the car. However, is it really worth it for the price and risks these cars pose? Sometimes it's important to just put down what you're doing and have some time in the car to have a conversation with whoever is in the car with you, or just ponder. Being in the car almost forces drivers to have a break from their busy, stressful lives and just breathe. The negative team also stated that disabled or elderly people will be able to drive with driverless cars. However, if someone is in such a position that they can't even drive, then surely they shouldn't be driving alone. What if something happened? What if the car broke down or they were left helpless in the car? It isn't safe for these people. The opposition also said that drink and drug driving will not be a problem. However, this really complicates the drink and drug driving laws, as it would be very difficult for the police to know whether or not the drivers are using auto mode or driving themselves. Besides, surely this is promoting drink driving and drug use. At the moment, the fact that you cannot drive after alcohol or drug use forces people not to use them, which is certainly a good thing for our society. It makes much more sense to just keep the current drug or alcohol driving laws, regardless of driverless cars. The opposition also used evidence from Google.com. However, this is an appeal to an inappropriate authority fallacy. Of course, Google would be wanting to promote their own product. Unbiased evidence is needed for this argument. The opposition also stated that driverless cars, although they cannot think ethically, will still save lives. Yes, they may save some lives, but whose life to save? Imagine if there was a rat on the road and also a school child. What if the car sensed the rat and decided to save the rat rather than the school child? These are decisions that only humans can make. The opposition also stated that change is good, and this is why it is important to keep progressing with new inventions such as driverless cars. But shouldn't we be focusing on bigger benefits for our society, such as cars that will have a positive effect on the environment? Things like electric cars. What if we could develop them further? Rather than producing driverless cars, which really aren't having that big benefit on the environment or society. I'll now continue to sum up my team's case. Asha, our first speaker, spoke to you about the ethical and economic issues of these cars. She spoke about how you cannot program ethical reasoning, as this is something only a human can do. She then spoke about how cars are not affordable for everyone. Sarah, our second speaker, then spoke to you about the practical issues of driverless cars. She spoke about how they are very easy targets for hackers, and how this is very unsafe. She also spoke about how computers aren't perfect, and there have already been numerous technology fails in these cars. They clearly aren't the miraculous answer. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, driverless cars are a really bad idea.
call upon the third negative speaker, Tori Shanks.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic of tonight's debate is that driverless cars are a really bad idea. We, the negative team, strongly believe that this statement is false. Tonight, as the negative speaker, I will be pointing out the flaws in the opposition's arguments and then summing up my team's case. The whole affirmative team has stated that hacking and glitches would be a problem, thus making driverless cars a bad idea. However, that hasn't been accounted for. What hasn't been accounted for is the fact that a human-controlled car also can be hacked. According to the Telegraph, 24 car models from 19 manufacturers can be easily hacked using a radio amplifier. If this problem of hacking is important enough for driverless cars to be considered a really bad idea, then why aren't other cars? This is clear evidence that driverless cars are not a bad idea. The first affirmative speaker has tried to tell you that mixing driverless cars with those that rely on humans behind the wheel will create chaos. This is false. Driverless cars are programmed to know how to function on the roads. Driving does not need human communication to work. In fact, as our first speaker Jack has already stated, 90% of all car crashes are due to human error. Doesn't this make driverless cars a better option? Also, how would the introduction of a new type of vehicle suddenly have such an impact on roads? This shows that driverless cars are not a bad idea. The second affirmative has tried to tell you that driverless cars are unsafe to drive due to past experiences while testing. While it is true that at the moment driverless cars are not 100% safe for our roads at the moment, by the time they are released to all of the general public, these cars would have been tested to correct these faults and prevent them from harming the user. Thomas Edison took over 1,000 attempts to finally perfect the revolutionary invention of the light bulb. The same goes for driverless cars. This proves that driverless cars are not a really bad idea. The third affirmative speaker has tried to tell you that there have been 2 accidents while testing the driverless car, and it is not 100% safe because of this. This is false, as the accidents that were reported were of human error from the operators. One of the operators took manual control of the car and managed to crash it into another operator rear-ended of Google cars. These two accidents were not the driverless car's fault, but the driver's fault, it further proves how dangerous people can be behind the wheel if they manage to crash driverless cars. The third affirmative has also stated that driverless cars will not benefit society, but as our second speaker, Ellie, has already pointed out, driverless cars would help so many people that are currently unable to drive themselves from point A to point B and help them gain a sense of responsibility and independence, rather than relying on their friends, family, and carers around them. I will now sum up my team's case. Our first speaker, Jack, had 2 points tonight. His first point was that at the moment, there are too many crashes on our roads. 3,287 people die every day on average due to road accidents, and up to 90% of these crashes are due to human error. Just imagine how many lives could be saved with driverless cars. Jack's second point was that driverless cars introduce potential savings for both the government and individuals. From an individual's perspective, driverless cars would be a major time saver. If you were running late for an event, a driverless car allows you to use the car time as more time to collect and organize yourself, as you don't have to be the one controlling the wheel. From a government's perspective, with less crashes and deaths on the road, health systems wouldn't be as congested, which means less cost. Our second speaker, Ellie, also had 2 points tonight. Her first point was that technology is the future. Many marvelous inventions that are now used every day, such as the telephone or aeroplanes, were once doubted and deemed unnecessary, but over time has proven its worth. Aren't driverless cars the same as these examples? Her second point was that driverless cars would allow people who can't drive now to commute through cars. Driverless cars would help people who are told they can't drive because they are physically unable or aren't allowed to drive due to their health reasons. It would give these people a source of independence and make it so they don't have to rely on those around them so much. So in conclusion, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, driverless cars are not a really bad idea. Thank you.
Please wait while the adjudicator finalises the result.